Yeah, I was a TV mixer actually when I was 18. I worked for the German television. You're on the road a lot, mixing TV shows. You're very poorly paid. And you're always the person that makes things wrong because people don't give you proper instructions. So I became a software engineer and I'm now into HTTP headers. Very interesting topic, or not. And before I became a sound engineer, actually, I grew up in Germany, in the north of Germany to be specific. And my father was one of these tech-savvy people. So I was one of these people that had internet when internet was not yet a thing, right? So I grew up and I typed stuff in this address bar. Google was not there yet and was like, what should I do here? And we had the first search machines, and then at some point in Germany this thing appeared. So what you see here is U-boat.com. This translates to submarine, which basically was the first social network that I kind of saw on the internet. And there I was, 1999. This is where I'm from. Nothing is there, really nothing. And I found myself chatting to people from Berlin because we shared common interests like music. And this was for the first time when I figured out that the web connects people. So as mentioned, I became then a sound engineer because music was my thing. And this is what you do then. But then 2010, everything changed. And I became a web developer, more or less by accident. It was like, okay, what should I study? And I was like, yeah, you were always good with computers, so let's try computer science. And I madly fell in love with it, and then the whole statement that the web connects people actually changed. Because now I got superpowers, and the whole statement changed to we connect people. Because I'm building stuff that connects people. We as developers, we're enabling people, because sometimes they need something or a service that we built. And we help people. And as already mentioned, I'm Stefan. I work for a company called Twilio. So in case you wonder how to do phone calls and SMS and all these kind of things in your websites and applications, you can try that out. And the most important thing is that, hey, I'm Stefan, and I want to be a responsible developer. So when you're kind of interested in shipping good products, you very quickly look at some internet stats, right? So and there was 1999, middle of nowhere in Europe. And when you basically look around 2019, where are the most internet users coming from? They are coming from China, from India, and the United States. But that's just internet stats, right? And I also blog a little bit on my private blog. And when I look at my analytics, what I actually see there is that only the last month I had 300 people from Brazil reading my articles. I think this is super freaking cool, isn't it? I had 100 people from Vietnam and 80 people from South Africa. I'm connecting people here, right? How cool is that? But even though I'm very excited about this, at the end it really doesn't matter because we should be building for everybody. And I'm building web stuff for almost 10 years now, and when responsive web design, for example, came up, we had these statements all the time. We don't have users in a certain country. We have users that use a certain device. We have users that don't do something. Yeah, guess what? When you say that, you're creating a chicken and egg problem. When you're not building your stuff for users, then these users won't use your stuff, right? It's as easy as that. And building a good website today is actually very, very challenging. So what do you have to consider? You have to consider designs and color, right? Do you know that in Asia, for example, in certain countries, red and green is inverted? So that they have different meanings? Red is something good and green is something bad? Well, good luck with this one. You have to ship very good content. You have to take care of web performance. You have to make it accessible because some people use something like a screen reader. You have to figure out, so we're going to JSConf Budapest, right? You have to figure out what tech stack to use. I mean, I'm bike shedding tech stacks for hours. You have to optimize the network stack. You have to optimize it for several devices. And in the next 38 minutes, I want to talk about the network stack. So let's talk about HTTP. So when your browser makes an HTTP request, what happens is that it sends a set of key value pairs. These are called request headers. And the server then responds with another set of key value pairs. These are response headers and the actual resource that you requested. And just because it was trending 2 months ago or 3 months ago to buy a .dev domain, I bought a .dev domain. So what you see here is the responsible.dev, and you already see that JavaScript is disabled, but this is the site. So let's enable JavaScript and refresh it. All right. So there's a permission dialog that I'm not interested in. Some unicorns are hijacking the site, and I can also go to CodePen and can just frame the site and can pretend to be the responsible.dev. Right? This is how clickjacking works. Someone pretends to be your site. So there are a lot of issues with this site. So how can we use headers to make this site better? First of all, the web is a very scary place. And it's ridiculous that it's working today, in my opinion. Has anyone heard about this 6 months ago? Like thousands of sites mining cryptocurrency because a third-party plugin was hacked? Nobody noticed. Well, but some people just mining bitcoins everywhere. Then there was this is very old, but this is still very, very scary. So this is a Shop Talk Show. There's a podcast by Chris Koya, who runs CSS Tricks. And they invited a hacker who social engineered his way into a CDN provider. The CDN provider was hosting the global jQuery version. Think of this. So a hacker had access to the global jQuery. I mean, you could do some damage there. Or just recently there was the event, what was the name? The event stream incident, where there was this unmaintained NPM package, and just a person showed up and was like, went to the maintainer and said, hey, do you need help maintaining this? And I don't know if you do open source, but doing open source is very hard. So of course the maintainer was, hey, sure, here, you have all the access rights. And the person that came into the project then went over several commits and several releases, and at some point injected again something to read out cryptocurrency wallets on machine, which was then on million machines in the whole NPM ecosystem. Which is like, what? So the thing is that we always rely on others. And I believe that the web has to be safe, because it shouldn't be possible that my mother mines cryptocurrency by browsing the web without knowing. And an important thing for a safe internet is HTTPS. So HTTPS is basically HTTP over secure connection, which then helps to avoid man-in-the-middle attacks, right? When you go HTTP, you can never be really sure if it's really the endpoint you're talking with or if someone is sitting in the middle there. When you talk to people that know, that deal with security, they can spin up a public Wi-Fi very easily and can interfere your requests. Luckily, with HTTPS, you can also, browser vendors are pushing towards that you can only use cutting-edge features when you use HTTPS. And when you look around, there's this site out there. It's called Why No HTTPS. It's a little bit outdated, but we have 2019. Certificates are free. So when I looked around there, this is the ARD. This is the public governmental media outlet in Germany. And they're running on HTTP. It's like, how is this even possible? So what you should do today is you should run on HTTPS. And what is cool about this is that you can ensure that you always use encryption. So for example, there's the strict transport security header that you can set on the response. And what you can define in seconds, you can tell the browser, hey, always use HTTPS. You can tell it to include subdomains, and you can set something that is called a preload directive. What is cool about this preload directive is that when you have that, you can submit your site to this very pretty looking site. And this is basically getting entries and analyzing entries that go into this big JSON file. So what you see here is a JSON file that is propagated across browser vendors. And this list includes all the sites globally that should only work over HTTPS. Did you ever wonder why you cannot use local.dev over HTTP anymore in your browser? This file is the reason. .dev is included in this file. HTTPS, or enforcing HTTPS, has also another benefit though. So what happens when I'm on my mobile connection and I'm typing in an address bar? without protocol. This happens. The browser by default makes an HTTP request. When I'm on a slow 3G connection in a public transport, this takes seconds just to tell me, nope, go to the HTTPS version, please. So this is the HSTS header. What's the support for this? We're pretty there. So when your HTTPS setup is stable, you can use that today. You can speed up your site and you can make it more secure. So what do you do when you start using HTTPS? You probably, and you have a big site, you probably have to start upgrading a lot of resources, because maybe some things are referencing HTTP resources. How can you fix that without changing all the URLs to images and whatever you have in your site? There's this header that you can set. It's called Content Security Policy Upgrade Insecure Requests. And with this, everything magically is changed to HTTPS. All the images will run then over HTTPS. And I think that's very cool. That's not the only thing that CSP is for, Content Security Policy. It is actually designed to limit what is possible and allowed in a website. So what you see there is a tool that is called request.met-webperf.tools, and what you can do there is you can bump in a site and then analyze all the scripts and pixels that are in there. This happens when you add Google Tag Manager to your site, right? One script references another script, references another script. And how do you know that when you have 100 or 150 or 200 third-party scripts in your site, that they're all behaving and that they're not mining cryptocurrency? Well, you don't. And this is where CSP comes into play. CSP has a lot of directives, and you can basically boil down everything that is possible in your website. From where should be fonts loaded from, where should be images loaded from. And there are a few newer ones that are a little bit still cutting edge, but you can start using this. So you can use content security policy with a meta element. So you can define that in the head of your document. I'm more like a header person, right? Because otherwise I wouldn't stand here. And I use this header for my private site. The thing with this, though, is now you deploy this, you define what is possible, and you break your site because you forgot something, right? And you roll back, you fix it, you deploy again, and you break it again. I did that 3 times. You shouldn't be like me in that case. What you should do is you should first deploy the report-only header, which then allows that you can define a URL, and it will tell you, hey, Stefan, I would block this if this would be active. So this way you can define all your resources, you can deploy this, and then at some point you get you get no logs anymore for the stuff that is important, and then you can make it active. When you look closely and when you know CSP, you see that there's a big red warning sign in my CSP definition, and it's this one. So I allow inline script and eval in JavaScript. What's the reason for that? JavaScript fatigue. So I'm using a current JavaScript framework that needs to inline a JSON blob in the body, right, like a lot of frameworks do, and they don't have CSP options right now. I'm working on that. But how do you register inline scripts in CSP? What you can do is you can define a SHA value, which then is dependent on the content of the inline script. Or you can give your inline script an ID, a so-called nonce property. And this way you can also enable inline scripts in your HTML documents. So how's the support for CSP? CSP is there in 2 levels. CSP level 1 is pretty green. CSP level 2, we're getting there. But you can deploy this header. When the browser doesn't understand the directive, it will just ignore it. You can start using that today. So I think CSP is very important because I have to limit what is possible on my website. So I had a look how many people are using CSP. So what you see here is the HTTP archive. The HTTP archive is basically crawling the internet and gives you as a developer the option to run queries over this data set that they do. So how many pages use CSP out there? Any guess it?
300 percentile.
300 percentile. Can you give me a percent value?
0.3.
It's more?
Wow.
So actually, of 3 million crawled top Alexa pages, 6% were using CSP. I don't want to know how many of these sites run third-party snippets. And I think we can do better. So the rule for CSP is that deploy it with monitoring first, with report only, and then start enforcing it slowly. So I went back to my responsible.dev site and I deployed a new URL, which is /safe. So you see there that the unicorns are gone because I deployed a header that disallowed this cornifor script because it's not from my side. And also when I start to frame it on CodePen, it will also not allow this because I in CSP say, nope, this site shouldn't be framed. And these two things look like normal features, but I think this is very, very important because the web is crucial for people. And I also hang out on Twitter quite a little bit. And what happens when you hang out on Twitter? You see tweets like this. Yours doesn't work in Africa. This is not only about Africa, though. So I'm also traveling quite a little bit, right? So this is my mobile provider. And I was in the Ukraine 3 weeks ago. So I jump on the plane, I get off the plane, I turn on my phone, and I get this message. Stefan, you got 6 megabytes for €2, but you have to use it in 24 hours. The average website today is 2.5 megabytes. But I have to use the 6 megabytes in 24 hours, which is ridiculous. This is not only about Africa. This is about everybody who travels. This is about everybody who sits in public transport and doesn't have perfect signal. This is really for everybody. When you're interested about what actually your website costs, there's this nice site out there which is called What Does My Site Cost? It's run by Tim Cudlek, and what you can do there is you can dump in a URL and it will analyze this and will tell you, hey, a person in this country with this average income pays that amount of money to see your website. Imagine that when I'm in the Ukraine, visiting one website with 2.5 meg is, I don't know, 50 cents, which is ridiculously expensive. I think the web has to be affordable. And headers play a big role there too. So rule number 1, for headers making the web affordable, don't request the same content over and over again, right? So and there are just a few things that are very hard in computer science, and one of them is definitely caching, so I won't briefly touch the topic. Your assets should have cache control headers. So what you can define there is, hey browser, please use this asset for this amount of time. Just because you set this header on a resource doesn't necessarily mean, though, that the browser doesn't make a request to double check if the cached version is right. So what you should do on your assets that are like hashed, like you probably ship styles.hash.css or something. These are files that don't need to be revalidated again. When the browser once has them in its cache, it should always use that. There shouldn't be a revalidation step. So what you can use there is the immutable directive. Basically what this tells the browser is like, when you have it, don't revalidate it. It will never ever change. Because when it changes, it will have a different file name. What's the support for the immutable directive? Not that great, but you can use that. And you will save some requests on the wire. So as caching is a very hard problem, what you can do, if you want to learn more about it, because I don't want to get into the whole thing, is you can check this article, which is Cache Control for Civilians by Harry Roberts. And he goes into detail about all the directives that you can set on the cache control header. I think this is a very, very good resource. It's not only about saving requests, though. It's also about sending the right data. So what happens when your browser makes a request for HTML? It sends this header, accept encoding. And it tells the server basically, hey, I understand gzip, dfleet, and BR. BR stands for Brotli, which is a different compression algorithm. So I picked a CSS file, like this, which had 100K initially, then I gzipped it down to 15, and then I compressed it with Brotli, which meant that it went down to 10K. So I saved 5K, right? And I hear you saying, Stefan, 5K, come on. Who cares, right? Just yesterday, I read this article from Wikipedia. They're working for weeks to reduce their JavaScript bundle from 36 kilobyte to 28 kilobyte. This is nothing, right? And they're saving 1.4 terabytes just because of this deploy. I think this is very exciting. 6 kilobytes to a change like this. So I think that saving data on the wire is always a good thing. And when you have heard of Brotli before, You might be one of these people that tell me now, Stefan, but Brotli compression is so slow, because how it usually works is that we do gzip compression on the fly, right, on the server side, just flip in nginx config or something, and that's how it works. With Brotli, that's not really, but let's have a look. So the thing is that this is basically comparing apples with oranges. Gzip by default has 9 compression levels. Brotli by default has 11. And the thing now is that gzip in the default mode runs in level 6, which is made for very fast compression. Brotli, on the other hand, with level 11, is made for maximum file gains. Which then means that Brotli is very slow when you don't tweak it. The thing though is, when you change the mode Brotli is running in, you usually get better compression results with the same speed. This is why you can go to Cloudflare, for example, and you can just turn on the use Brotli compression algorithm, and you can save some bytes on the wire with this. And if you're maybe statically deploying your sites with the build process, you could go for the maximum savings and go in the hardcore saving mode, right? And then in your build process, and then just serve them statically anyways. If you want to learn more about Brotli compression, the friends from Akamai did a massive research about what that actually means. So how's the support for Brotli today? We're pretty green, and guess what? When you look at Facebook, they're shipping Brotli. When you look at Dropbox, they're shipping Brotli. All the big players are shipping Brotli because this saves them money on the big run. So it's about the right compression algorithm, but it's also about saving the correct media. So who's guilty of writing a picture element like this? No one? Come on, people. So what you see there is a picture element that feature detects if WebP is supported and then serves responsive images depending on the viewport width. This is not very maintainable. This will break easily. It could be a partial or something, but this is not nice things. What if I would tell you that the browser actually gives you this information for free? When the browser makes a request for an image, it will tell you what image formats it understands. So you see there the accept header. And how's the support for WebP today? Only Safari is missing in the party, but I think the peer pressure is pretty high now. So I think they will join the party at some point. So when a browser now makes a request, you can react on the server side and you can serve WebP even though the browser asks for a JPEG. That is possible. And if you want to have some additional information, what you can also do is you can, in the HTML response, you can set a header that is called accept.ch, which stands for client hints. And with this, you tell the browser, hey, I want to know about the width and the viewport width of you for the next 100 seconds. What happens then is that the browser not only tells you what image formats it understands, it also tells you the image width. How cool is that? So you can then have markup like this. This is referencing a JPEG element. You need the sizes attribute so that the browser knows how it's laid out in the HTML. And now you've got this request that tells you, hey, I understand WebP, and the image is that big right now. Can you please serve me the proper image? And this works for high resolution screens too. So you don't need markup changes at all. And you can then serve a tailored version via your service, or maybe you just hook in a service worker or something. I think that's pretty cool stuff. Client hints are relatively cutting edge though, so you have to be a little bit careful though. And if you want to learn more, Jeremy Wagner gives a lot of education about client hints, so you can check that out. So with images, you can save a lot of data on the wire. But did you know that there's also a saved data header that you can set in the browser? It's buried in the browser settings, which is then a request header. So when you request an HTML site, you can tell the server, hey, I want to save some data, which then means that in your JavaScript or on the server side, you could slim down the data that is on the wire, right? Because the person just told you, I want to save some data, right? A almost good example for this is Twitter Lite. So when you go to Twitter Lite, or this is now the real Twitter, so it was Twitter Lite for ages. So when you go to the settings, they have a save data mode. That's pretty cool. And with this, they serve low-res images initially to save you some bytes on the wire because you ask for it. I think this is very cool. What is not cool about this, though, is that they are not using the save data header. There's a spec for this, right? And they just re-implemented it. And I think this is a big, big issue with the web development industry that we have today. Why don't look browsers like this? And we have this button next to the URL bar. Why do I have to go 2 settings down in the browser settings to tell, hey, I want to save data? This should be very, very easy. Because I'm in the Ukraine and I'm paying €2 for 6 megabytes. And when we're at it, we now have a lot of cool features out there, right? Prefer dark interface. Does anybody know how you can enable the dark interface in macOS just because you're lying in bed? No, because it's buried in macOS settings. This is great. The only people that see dark interfaces right now are developers because they think it's cool that you can use the media query for that. What about preferred reduced motion? Do you know how you can enable this? This is in the accessibility features. In my opinion, browser vendors right now are missing big times because we're pretending to building good stuff, but at the end, nobody cares because nobody knows about this. These settings should be easily accessible all the time for users that are not technical. Because otherwise, nobody will care, right? Good stuff that I see a dark side on my computer, but nobody else will. Talking about saved data, though, you have to be a little bit careful because Chrome or Google does their thing. When you ship a saved data so when you enable saved data in Google Chrome, it might be that you hit a proxy server from Google because they decide that they know better how to make the web faster than you do. Which is maybe fair because which websites actually respect the saved data header? Not many. But I'm not sure how I feel about this. So if you don't want Google to have in between you and your users, you can define a cache control no transform. And you can initially tell, hey, don't proxy my stuff, no matter what. But then there are also bright moments like this. Shopify, right? They generate a good amount of traffic. And 20% of the requests hitting Shopify have saved data enabled. Now think about this. Finding the saved data setting is not the easiest thing in the world. If every 5th person has this enabled, I think the person really wants to save data. And Shopify reduces their overall shipped data by 13%. I think this is very exciting. But still, 20% of the people, I think this is a very high number. So with the saved data header, if you want to learn how to start working with this article was pretty good. And I think we should tailor experience towards what the user wants. And a lot of people are then like, Stefan, but I actually cannot slim down the experience, right? Because someone defines a header. I think you can, because when a person tells you to do so, please follow the instructions. Ship low-res images. Maybe skip the carousel nobody cares about. Ship the font nobody cares about, right? People can have still a decent experience with half of the amount of data. So let's have a look at the responsible dev/affordable. So when you go there, you see that, first of all, I'm shipping Brotli, which is cool, saving some bytes on the wire. And then let's have a look at the image here. So first of all, I'm referencing a JPEG, but I'm serving a WebP. Because the browser tells me that it's understanding WebP. And now when I resize the image, I'm able to ship different image sizes because the browser also ships client hints and tells me how wide the image is. With this, I can, on the server side, just ship the proper image because I have all the information I need. What image format and what is the dimension of the image. I think that's very cool. And in my source code, all I need is image, source, and a sizes attribute. This gets me really excited because the web is with us every day, right? Unfortunately, we're slowly messing it up, in my opinion. And let me show you the current state of the internet. Anyone guilty of building this? Well, I did several when someone moved away with the mouse cursor. It's like, hey, sign up for the newsletter before you go. I think that's not the right approach because I think that the web should be respectful, right? Imagine that you're passing by a storefront, right? And someone is jumping out of the storefront. It's like, hey, rate my window 1 to 10. How's it going? I think that's just the wrong approach. And one thing for respect is respecting time. And just by optimizing a few things, what you can do is you can value the time of the users on the website a little bit more. So what you can do is you can define a link element, and with this you can tell the browser, hey, you don't know it yet, but you will request this resource in a few seconds. And this way the resource is then already flying and sitting in the browser's cache. Or you go with the link element. So you can use this for style sheets or for fonts or something for crucial resources that are very important. When you use the header variant, you have to be a little bit careful though, because some CDNs and proxy will use HTTP push when you use the link element. So make sure that you use the no push directive, because HTTP to push is still not the best option. If you want to learn more about that, you can talk to me later. This is great to speed up critical resources like fonts and style sheets. So how's the support for that today? I mean, you can just use it and maybe speed up the loading process or the moment when something appears on screen with a second or something. This adds up. And then we have the annoying part of the web today, which is the AMP reaction. So in case you don't know AMP stands for Accelerated Mobile Pages. It's by Google. So they are enforcing their standards onto the web. And if you think that's a good idea or a bad idea, I leave that up to you. But basically what they do is they limit HTML and the feature set that the web provides with the JavaScript library. So, and 3 years ago, I was giving a talk about AMP. I'm not the biggest fan of AMP, but I think technically it's very interesting how they do what they do. And then you have, in the web development industry, all these standards people that are spec makers, right? And here you see Joachim Weiss, who worked on the resources images spec, and he was like, this is not good. We have to have a mechanism to allow developers to limit the feature sets that are possible on a website. And why do I show you this slide deck from myself 2.5 years ago? Because he said we need to have a standard. And now 2.5 years later, we have a standard, which I think is beautiful. So what you see there is the feature policy header. And with this, you can basically tell the browser, should a website or a third party be able to vibrate my phone? Nope. Should it be able to use geolocation? How often are you asked for geolocation permissions when you browse the web? And you can basically nail it down to a lot of things, which I think is very beautiful because this gives me another level of security. So even though this is now there, we are now entering cutting edge stuff. But I'm very excited about these two, that you will be able to define that you don't want to send not optimized and not resized images. So you can give yourself a safety net and not deploy stuff because your staging environment will just not show images. So what's the header that I ship on my private website then again? That's not too bad. But with this, I can be sure, because I use a few third parties on my site for a commenting system, that these are not misbehaving and will ask for geolocation or something. Feature policy also works for iframes. Good stuff, because you usually don't control these either. And you have a JavaScript API, which is like document feature policy, and then you can check if this feature is allowed in the context. This just recently changed. If you Google around, be careful with this. So if you looked at the list that I just showed you very, very carefully, there was the most annoying one was missing in there, which was like push notifications, right? When people started working on feature policy, they figured out, well, it's actually a little bit harder to disallow push notifications. So the discussion is ongoing. It doesn't look like this will come very soon. But you can check out this GitHub issue if you want to. So how's the support for feature policy? We're getting there. But you can deploy the header if you want to today. And if it works, it works. And then we have the last topic, respecting privacy, right? A lot of people respect privacy, or want that their privacy is respected. Did you know that there's a do not track header that you can set, for example, in Firefox? You could send it there, and then the browser would just send a do not track me header, please. This was supported everywhere until Safari dropped it, because it was used to track people and to fingerprint them. Which led us then to this story. So Safari dropped the support for do not track as a header. And personally, I think it was a nice try, right? But people won't accept a do not track header. They will track you anyways, because this is how the internet generates money. So I don't think that a header is the solution to this. So when we look at these settings now, where are we going with privacy? Well, we're going there. Browsers are slowly implementing features to limit the tracking nonsense or the tracking chaos that we have. So you see here Firefox with content blocking and policies. Samsung does some machine learning stuff to prevent tracking, right? Because everything has to be machine learning. Safari, intelligent tracking prevention. It goes on and on and on. And I don't know if you noticed that, but the next browser war is on its way. And it's about privacy. And this will decide what browser will get a little bit of Chrome's market share in the future. So when we go to the responsible.dev/respectful, you will see that the permission dialog is gone because I blocked it, because I don't want to have this. And when I look at the waterfall here, you will see that this image was loaded twice, even though it was referenced in CSS, because I set a link preload header. So overall, I think that the building for the web is very, very hard. You have to consider design, content, performance, accessibility, frameworks, networks, devices. And how can you make sure that you ship good products for the web? Well, we have also good tools these days. So in Chrome, we have Google Lighthouse, which you can run, and it will help you give you some nice tips and tricks on how you can improve your website, which I think is great. Unfortunately, Lighthouse doesn't take headers into consideration. And a tool that is absolutely underrated is WebHint. Has anybody heard of WebHint? It's kind of the Microsoft Lighthouse alternative. It's a service online. This is the most picky tool ever. It is ridiculously picky. I'm working for months to have a perfect WebHint score, and I'm still far away. And it takes headers into consideration. So if you want to feel very bad that you're very bad developers, try that one. If you want to get a complete overview about headers and what they are capable of, for security stuff, securityheaders.com, this is perfect, just dump it in. And you get all the headers that you could set for a security perspective. The highest score is A+. I have an A because I have inline, unsafe inline in my CSP. If you want to have a look at a complete list of all the headers that are fancy these days, my friend Shep maintains this list, which is HTTP headers, the hidden champions for headers. There's so much knowledge in this slide deck. So if you found the stuff that I told you right now is interesting, this is for you. And Andrew Betts works on specs. He gives this talk, which is called Headers for Hackers. This is also a great resource. So I think that the web has to be safe because nobody should mine Bitcoin in their sites without knowing. I think that the web has to be affordable because people are using the web everywhere on the planet, and depending on their situation, it should be usable for everybody. And I think it should be respectful because nobody likes annoying people on the street, right? Let's just respect people. So I think that the web has to be safe, affordable, and respectful so that it really is for everybody. And I'm Stefan, thank you very much. And I have some stickers if you want to.